Hello, Janksters, and welcome to another edition of the MagicJank Podcast, the weekly show where members of Team MagicJank get together and we talk about the latest happenings in Magic the Gathering. And this week, we got some stuff for you. You'll notice actually that we're coming about a day later than we normally do because there was a banned and restricted announcement earlier today, and I wanted to make sure we covered it and didn't have to wait a week to get there. So here we are. So we're going to be talking about that as well as the Arena Championship 7 that happened just this past weekend, which really opens up so a lot of discussion around Standard and really where the format's at. So I'm looking forward to it. We got a good one. And I know it's going to be a good one because I'm joined by the one and only Carlo C. Favaretto Jr. How we doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a busy last couple weeks, right? Because I think it's been like a couple weeks since I've been here. But
Yep.
I've been going around playing a bunch of Magic events. So, I mean, even when I'm not here, I'm doing Magic stuff. So, yeah, it's been busy.
Excellent. Yeah, fantastic. I'm about to say, because, yeah, you had PAX, and then this weekend you had another, you had another event. An RCQ, yeah.
And next Sunday, I'm getting ready for another RCQ right before the holidays. So, yeah, lots of Magic playing.
Man. Love it. Love it. Well, I'm looking forward to the day when I'm rooting for you on the Pro Tour because I know it's coming. Yeah, absolutely.
We're trying.
Oh,
slowly
heck
but
yeah,
surely.
man. You got this. I have no doubt. All right. But yeah, so rather than, I don't know, lovely pleasantries as always. I'm always here for it. But let's dive into it, man. The announcement came out today, December 16th. Big old ban restricted announcement, and this was actually the first one that they've done since the new cadence, and we've got a couple months until the next one, so hopefully this will tide us over. So just starting from the top and working our way through, Standard, no changes. Are we surprised by this?
No.
Yeah. Same.
Standard is extremely healthy. Even though they only gave a few specific examples in the ban announcement of a few specific decks, they talked about reanimating decks with Zombify. They talked about putting Atraxa into play with Coma, which honestly I really haven't seen. They talked about Screaming Nemesis and Burst Lightning and the red aggro decks, and they also talked about Zur Overlords. And those were the examples that they used to talk about Standard being healthy. But honestly, those are only 4 examples, and there's about 8 A-tier decks that exist in Standard at the moment, among your B, C, and whatever other jank that we like to play every once in a while.
Oh, totally.
Standard is healthy. It's still, in my opinion, the best constructed format you can play, even though my opinion might be a little bit biased. You might be looking at some like recent tournament results, and you're like, oh my god, there's not so much diversity in Standard. Specifically, if you were looking at the Arena Championship 7, and we're going to dive more into that. Yeah, it's true. You might see an overwhelming number of Dimir mid-range decks because it's probably the most consistent mid-range deck that is out there right now. Kaido is a powerhouse. Drawing 8 cards when attacking with 4 creatures is pretty good, I heard.
Yeah, that seems good. Yeah.
And it's true. You might see a lot of like Gruul aggro decks out there, and that's because the mouse is good. Turns out Screaming Nemesis is probably worth its price tag. Those decks are strong. So yeah, you got to come ready to battle against them. And so I didn't anticipate any Standard ban announcements. I also didn't anticipate it because we're in the middle of Standard RCQ season, and it would be super awkward to make Standard bans when we're literally in the middle of it. So I think Standard will rotate again in the summer. I don't anticipate any Standard bans, even with the release of a couple sets that have yet to come out. Because Standard will rotate itself. Something becomes really, really unpleasant to play against. You're losing a year's worth of cards in July, roughly, and the oldest set in Standard will be Wilds of Eldraine. So if you're tired of playing against like Poison strategies, and you're tired of Atraxa, those cards, they rotate out, believe it or not. Fairy Mastermind will rotate out, so that'll be a loss to the Dimir deck. Some of your fast lands, like Copperline Gorge, will rotate out, making the Gruul deck less consistent. So think about those things, right? And you have lots of sets that have yet to be added to Standard up until then, because in June is when the Final Fantasy set gets released, which is standard legal, right?
Yep.
So we have 3 more standard releases. It should be Aether Drift, Cons, Final Fantasy, in that order. And the Edge of Eternities.
Yeah, then Edge of Eternities
four
prior
more
to the
sets
rotation
to come in standard before rotation. Yeah.
Yep.
So, we got a while to go, and if the Universe's Beyond sets that have yet to come out are an indicator of strengthening of a standard format, if the power level is going to be higher in those sets, they will be sets that rotate standard without rotation happening. So
possibly. Yeah, it's very possible. So I can't imagine a ban unless there is a theme in one of these upcoming sets about cost reduction that makes Up the Beanstalk just like, because cards like that are already pretty insane, but we're not able to really abuse it in standard the way that other formats have been able to really make it truly problematic. Like the design is problematic, in its own way, but right now it's not really a harmful force on the metagame. And so unless something like that happens in the future, which I don't anticipate, I don't expect to see a standard ban in the next year. I'll be surprised, barring something crazy in some of the new sets that we just haven't seen yet. Who knows? Maybe the Aether Spark from Aether Drift is like totally cracked. I don't know. We'll see.
I hope so.
I mean, I kind of do too. Not gonna lie.
That's me and my Planeswalker bias. So it is what it is.
Yeah, Planeswalker equipment. Let's go. Why not? Let's do it.
I will say, anyway. You bring up the Beanstalk, and for how powerful that card is, it's literally banned in Modern.
Yeah.
So imagine the standard legal uncommon is so good that it's banned in Modern. That is, 20 plus years of Magic, right?
Yep.
And we've talked about a couple times Up the Beanstalk being very powerful, especially in the Overlords deck. Being able to play turn 2 Up the Beanstalk, turn 3 Overlord of the Hauntwoods is crazy good. And the other deck that's playing Up the Beanstalk right now that uses it as an engine is the Eddie Merc Crab Simic Terror deck.
Yes.
Playing Up the Beanstalk, casting Eddie Merc Crab for 2, draw a card, tap 2 opponent's creatures. Seems great. Pay 1 mana, cast Tolarian, Terra, have 5/5, ward 2, draw card, and just keep going.
And that deck only exists because Up the Beanstalk's available. If you don't have that card draw engine, that deck just does not work.
Yes.
It's pretty wild. Yeah.
And this isn't me advocating for Up the Beanstalk to be gone from standard. No. I think the card is very fair. It just it really is that powerful of a card. So I am surprised that something hasn't been absolutely broken with this card to break it in this format, and that could just be because of card availability, right? There are better tuned cards in Modern.
Yes, I mean the fact that there are genuinely free cards in Modern that can take advantage of this is, I think, the biggest thing. Because you could argue that the Domain deck that we've seen that has some flavor of it has been around for. Since Eldraine came out. And I would argue that Up the Beanstalk and Leyline Binding working together. I mean, Leyline Binding saw almost no play until Up the Beanstalk showed up. Then all of a sudden it just became premier removal in the format, And so I would argue that Up the Beanstalk is a factor. It's powerful enough that there are plenty of decks that have been using it since we got it. But it isn't, it has been problematic in older formats where it's just not quite in standard. But anyway, so the reason that I bring that up is because that's the one card that I could see a support piece really breaking to the point where it becomes a disproportionate amount of the metagame as far as cards that we currently know of. Because other than that, we have Unholy Annex, Caretaker's Talent, a lot of cards that are very, very strong and are definitely stand above kind of the crowd. But the thing is, they're 4 or 5 cards that are up there standing above the crowd, and they don't fit in the same deck. So. Well, thankfully. Okay, if what are you gonna do, right? I don't think any of those are. I think that's a good thing, right? And so at the end of the day, that results in a healthy format. So I dig standard right now. I think it's in a good place. So no bans was absolutely correct. If they had banned anything, I would have been shocked.
Very shocked. Yeah.
That said, there have been a lot of talk. Another format that got touched in this ban and restriction announcement was Pioneer. Now, there had been some talk about some cards that maybe were going to be problematic in Pioneer. Fable the Mirror Breaker and Treasure Cruise were ones that came up and were often kind of thrown around and considered, questioned. and they were untouched. Instead, Gigantha the Wellspring is banned.
My elk.
Yes, the elk, the elemental elk. Actually, I have a Gigantha commander deck. I love this card. Yeah, and there we go. So the reason that they cited was too many decks that were using disparate strategies that weren't actually themed around anything that Gigantha cares about. You know, Gigantha is a Gruul card that taps for Wooburg that can be spent for, but you can only use the mana for, you know, colored activation. So you would think it's like in a ramp strategy with all 5 colors represented, but it's in these 2 and 3 color, you know, value decks where you just can have it just cause. And in most games, if you execute your strategy, you don't need it, but it's just this backup option just in case you just need a body when resources are tight. And in the ban announcement, they commented that there were too many decks that were running it basically just cuz, and there were a lot of cards that those decks could consider including, but the value of Gigantha just edged any of those other cards out of the format or out of consideration, and they saw that as problematic.
Listen, for the limited amount of time that I've actually played Pioneer, and I rather enjoy playing Pioneer more than Modern.
Okay.
There were only really a few decks that I remember correctly that Jingantha was used in. One of them being the Jun food deck, or you know, cat oven deck with Yigra from Bloomburrow. Just using that as, you know, essentially that free card that you could buy for 3 colorless, put in your hand, and if you flood out later, here's this 5/5. I don't think that deck was restricted based on building around Gigantha. I think that deck is very tuned and actually really doesn't care whether or not you have Gigantha in the end. Hell, it might even be right to not play Gigantha at all and just play an actual 15th sideboard card, right?
Sure.
So, but you know, yeah, there might be some other decks in that format that take advantage of that. But it's interesting to me that they chose to ban this card based on play percentage versus like results percentage. If you told me that Jingantha decks were 40% of the metagame and you had to ban it because they're too consistent because of Jingantha, which is false about Pioneer, then that would make sense.
Sure.
But to say that you're hurting the format's diversity because you're building around this one card, I don't know that I agree with that. You know, and I went to play the Pioneer RC that was in, you know, DC. And Pioneer was so diverse. You had 1,600 plus people there playing Pioneer. They weren't playing their deck because of Jingantha.
No.
They chose whether or not to put Jingantha in their deck if they wanted that free not free, 3 mana cost buy a creature at the end of the deal. Yes, it came with a restriction. All companions came with a restriction when they printed those cards. And, you know, that's because typically they had a powerful ability. I mean, look at Yorion the Sky Nomad. That card's banned in Pioneer. No, it's not. It's not banned in Pioneer. It's not, which is very strange. So that's my point is the Yorion decks are very powerful in Pioneer, specifically the enigmatic incarnation decks that are 80 cards. Or Niv Mizzet, which just came essentially to Arena because of Bring to Light, right? Yep. They play Yorion, and there are 80 card control decks that play Yorion also that take advantage of like Omen of the Sea, right? And blinkable like draw cards or scry abilities and stuff like that because of Yorion. So for you to ban like Jingantha before Yorion doesn't make any sense to me, because Yorion gives you so much more value and gives you a restriction of adding 20 more cards to your deck. Yorion is banned in Modern, and it got banned in Modern to pay for Omnath's sins. Not because Yorion was too strong, but because the Omnath deck that Yorion was played in was too strong in Modern. And interesting enough, they also banned Jingantha out of Modern, which don't make any sense to me at all. And we'll get to that in a bit.
Yeah.
But all of these companions, you know, and this is my thought back in Ikoria when they really fumbled the ball here when they created the companion mechanic. because originally they were just an extra card that you had in your hand. You didn't have to pay 3 colorless. You could just cast it from exile like it was your commander. Instead of Arati and all those cards, they should have just banned them out of the formats that they were legal, because they were too strong with the first iteration of the companion ability. You never should be able to play with basically a free card, right, that you could take at any time, and that really showed you would have showed you a lack of diversity in those formats with the original companion rule. Whereas you have to buy your companion to put it into your hand now.
And even with that nerf, they're still, considered this like super low cost. They're not quite free anymore, but like they might as well be. Like there's the opportunity cost is so low, you just might as well do it. And yeah, I mean, I don't understand why companions are still legal anywhere. And to be fair, I really like the designs of these cards. Like, I think a lot of them are actually really cool. I mean, I have multiple commander decks that are leveraging the companions as the commander. Where like I didn't want to deal with the restriction, but I thought mechanically they were interesting, including Giganta. I have a 5-color ramp deck in Commander that uses Giganta in the command zone. It's a very powerful, cool card that plays nicely. As long as you ignore all that companion text. It's which is pretty problematic, I gotta be honest. And I think at this point the companion mechanic should just be I don't know, just dropped. Like it's too late now, I'm sure, but if
you're gonna keep banning them, just ban all of them and end
just drop
the torture.
They did it with stickers, right? They finally accepted like stickers in Legacy is just a terrible idea. Let's just not do that anymore. Sorry everyone, they're all banned. And I feel like companion is right in that same. I mean, we have a precedent now for a mechanic, for every card referencing a mechanic beyond like anti. I suppose that was probably the first one that you could point to. But yeah. But I mean that you actually like the moment you have to look up state laws to discuss whether or not a mechanic's okay. That's when you need ownership and what. Then okay, that's its own separate thing. But at this point, I do think the companions should all just be banned, and I don't see any value in keeping them around.
So I mean, I don't understand their choice or their reasoning, particularly for banning Jingantha. I mean, maybe if I played Pioneer more, I would understand it. But interestingly enough, to sort of like segue into the modern discussion, they also banned Jingantha in modern. And when you take a look at the reasoning for banning Jingantha in modern, it says many of the same reasons as explained above, which doesn't make sense at all for modern, because modern is infinite years of Magic. I'm looking to play the best possible deck in the format when I'm playing modern. I'm not caring about my deck selection or deck choice or card choice based around this companion that probably isn't as powerful as some other decks that exist in the format.
Oh,
right?
Who ever lost a game of modern and thought, "Oh, that stupid elk! It's that stupid elk again."
Right.
That those conversations aren't happening.
Yes. Restricting the possible cards that your decks can play in modern is a disservice to yourself rather than anything else, especially in that format. And so, interestingly enough, for this decision, they said Jingantha is clocking in at around 40% of all modern decks, from Energy to Zoo to several more fringe strategies. To reduce the dominance of Boros Energy and to increase the amount of diverse card choices available in modern, Jingantha is banned. The Boros Energy wasn't oppressive because of Jingantha.
No.
Boros Energy was oppressive because of Amped Raptor plus the One Ring plus all of the great synergy that comes with that energy deck. Jingantha doesn't tap for energy. Jingantha doesn't produce energy. Jingantha was a way for the Boros deck to buy the commander, the companion, from exile to do something when it fumbles late in the game, and it can put a 5/5 on the board. And if I just got to worry about a 5/5 being on the board in Modern that has access to infinite types of removal spells to deal with a silly little 5/5, I don't know. I don't understand it.
Yeah, what is effectively a vanilla 5/5, I can't imagine.
And if you're telling me that the strongest deck in Modern at that point, right, Boros Energy, is restricting the types of cards that it can play in it because of the restriction of the companion, also doesn't make any sense to me.
No,
but
if
listen,
you want,
we're talking about, folks who are in the FFL or the Future League, right? So they are seeing maybe what strategies are yet to come in these formats. They are testing with cards that haven't come out yet. Another big thing is they talked about the iteration and integration of the different Modern Horizon sets and like their power levels, and it's like, just stop doing that to the format, please.
That'd be nice.
I don't know.
If Boros Energy, if Boros Energy is the problem, don't print a paint by numbers deck that is stronger than anything else in the format.
Right.
Like, because it's like Guide of Souls into Amped Raptor with the Johnny, and like, of course that deck was going to be nuts. Like, of course it was.
Then the energy deck is not busted because of Jingantha. The energy deck is busted because the energy cards are busted.
Yep.
Static Prison is more of a busted card in the energy deck than Jingantha the Wellspring.
Agreed. Yeah, or Galvanic Iteration or any of that stuff. 100%. Or Galvanic Discharge. Anyway. Yeah, a whole bunch of 1-mana removal and 1 and 2 drop threats that are just insane. It's just, it's silly. So, yep. And so the idea of banning a companion because of, format diversity. I mean, sure, whatever. I don't think anybody's going to lose sleep over this. And fine. But to try to claim that it's to, nerfing the Boros Energy was part of that consideration it sounds silly to me. In Modern, there were a number of other bans that hit. So the One Ring. Yeah. They did it. They actually pulled the plug on the One Ring. Which, wow. I'm well, there's a part of me that's surprised, but there's another part of me that kind of thinks that there was no way they couldn't. Yeah.
Listen, again, for someone who primarily plays Standard and only played a couple RCQs that were at my LGS just for the sake of playing them because they were at my LGS.
Mm-hmm.
There were multiple games in which I played that I'm very ahead on the board.
Yep.
I'm trying to win this game. My opponent has 0 cards in hand. They draw the One Ring, play the One Ring. I've lost the game.
Yep.
I've never experienced any other situation in Magic before where that's been the case. And that's even without my opponent chaining the One Rings. Like going 1 into draw the card, into cast another One Ring, protection again. Like just the One Ring was enough for the turn to tide, or the tide to turn, however you want to call it. And that's not even in like the most busted decks that you could play it in. Partnering the Boros Energy deck together with the One Ring. You want to ask why that deck had so much win percentage? I mean, yes, Amped Raptor is a busted uncommon.
Yep.
This is true. The One Ring is ridiculous. So it's interesting. That card took 18 months to be banned out of this format.
Yep.
And you knew how strong that card was from the minute it was printed. Yeah. And we've talked about it before here, like in questions. Hey, are they going to hit the One Ring finally or whatever? It surprises me. It's really surprising me that it took this long. Given like their justification for banning like Smuggler's Copter out of Pioneer initially was because any deck could play this card. And we're sitting here looking at this One Ring card. It costs 4 colorless. Any deck can play this card. And, we're not talking about a cheap card either. I mean, there was one time you can get One Rings for like $50 or whatever, and it probably fluctuated between like $50 and $80 over the last 18 months. So it's not like you were purchasing a cheap card. You're talking about laying down $200 for a playset of a broken card, and it's like you have to play this card because your opponent is also playing it. So you want to talk about a card that leads to like deck restriction.
Right?
This does more than Jingantha does, because you're taking a full playset of a card and slamming it in your deck because you know that your opponent has One Rings and you need your One Rings to counteract your opponent's One Rings. Right. That leads to less format diversity, in my opinion. So 100%. I don't know why we waited this long for this card. But I understand that there probably had to be some feeling like, how do we take this like super IP of Lord of the Rings, print literally the One Ring into the set, right? The namesake of the series, or I guess one of the namesakes of the series. Use it as your one of one serialized card to chase in the set to get people to buy collector packs. Post Malone buys the One of One ring for more than $2 million.
Yeah, which is
imagine
that's its own thing, sure.
And then it takes 18 months to ban the broken card just out of Modern. So Commander players rejoice. Legacy players, vintage players, you can still play this card, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and the
number
number
is playable. Post Malone's investment isn't going anywhere, right?
Yeah,
that card is probably going to be worth more money.
That card was not worth $2 million because he wanted to put it in his Modern deck. That's not what was going on there. Yeah,
it's because it needed to be slabbed and put around a gold chain, and maybe walk around with it every once in a while.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and so I've seen people argue prior to this announcement, and because there was some rumblings around this, because we were seeing over half the decks in the format were running this, and there's legit question of like, well, the people who aren't running it, is it because their decks are better without it, or just because it's so expensive? Like, it was the fact that that's really the question. It's silly. I've seen some people arguing that, well, the entire Lord of the Rings franchise, the entire thing, like Tolkien's work, arguably even going back to The Hobbit, is kind of featuring the notion of how broken and powerful this ring is. It's literally warping an entire world around how strong it is. And so, yeah, of course it's got to be strong and it needs to warp some things if it's here. It's like, well, but I'm of the opinion that I don't want my gameplay experience to be homogenous and totally suck for the sake of being faithful to the IP. I don't think that's worth it. And I think this card, they just pushed it a little too hard. And there's so many things. I also heard people, another talking point that I've heard mentioned that I think has merit, but still is just impractical, unfortunately, is restricted. They could have restricted it so you're only allowed to have one in your deck, which would make it significantly worse because you can't chain them all of a sudden. And that would be fine. However, maintaining a restricted list for Modern is a level of challenge and frustration. And then deck checks become a whole other issue at tournaments, and the logistics of that is a huge headache. So, I think had they printed something on the card that says you may only have one in your deck or something, like then if it was on the card instead of its own separate like restricted list, okay, maybe, but they didn't. So, and so as it stands, that would just be impractical, unfortunately, because talk about flavor, that also would be pretty flavorful. It's literally the one ring. And so, the legend rule applying to the one ring doesn't make a lick of sense. But anyway, so honestly, good riddance. I don't think, I think the Modern format is going to play better as a direct result of this card leaving. The one thing, as a Commander player myself, I'm a little bummed at the thought of all the, all my friends who I play with regularly who hadn't sprung for the One Ring, who now that the price will presumably dip as all the disgruntled Modern players are offloading their copies. I'm probably going to see it a lot more on in casual pods than I had before, but
yeah, for sure.
C'est la vie.
So long, One Ring.
Yes.
Your top decks will not be missed.
No. But another card that you mentioned that also got hit with the ban hammer was Amped Raptor. Yeah, busted uncommon in that energy deck. It was a very strong 2-drop in the energy deck. I mean, honestly, it's a 2/1 first striker that has kind of a semi-nerfed like Cascade style effect. And so it's just it's a clean 2-for-1 and on a 2/1 first striker. I mean, it's an uncommon 2-drop that can favorably block Ragavan while getting you, while free spinning into your Orcish Bowmaster or whatever. So like kind of nuts.
Spin you into Orcish Bowmaster, spin you into a Johnny, Ocelot Pride, Guide of Souls, Static Prison into a removal spell, Galvanic Discharge, give you more energy for a removal spell. All that stuff. Like, the card was just busted because it synergized so well with other cards in the set. And it shows you how hard they pushed that mechanic in that particular color pairing, right? Boros. Any hand that started with being able to play Amped Raptor on turn 2 was keepable.
Was good,
right?
Exactly.
Like you could see that you have 2 lands Amped Raptor. Okay, I can keep this hand. It doesn't matter what else I have.
It'll come together.
By the time you play Guide of Souls into Amped Raptor, you're talking about going from a 1-drop to 3 energy to hitting a removal spell or another creature, hitting the Ajani flipping into a Planeswalker on the same turn. a little silly. A little silly.
It's ridiculous. And that kind of, the fact that Amp Raptor gives you the 2 energy and it would trigger the Guide of Souls, you'd have 3 energy right there. Yes. If you spin into a 1-drop creature, then the Guide of Souls is all of a sudden triggering on the attack. And like, what are we even doing here? Like, that's, that's nutty.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And very, very little answers. And like, yes, you can make the argument that Modern has lots of removal in it. You're correct. It does.
Sure.
But when you're playing these things turn 1 into turn 2, it's kind of hard to deal with that. You can only so many decks can play Fatal Push, and you can only Fatal Push so many creatures.
Yep.
When literally they're playing 4 Guided Souls, 4 Ocelot Pride, 4 Amp Raptor, 4 Johnny. There's many things that card can do. I think that's the best card that they could have hit. There were speculation on whether or not folks online on the Twitterverse, on the Blue Sky, on everywhere else, we're talking about, why don't we just ban Guide of Souls, because Guide of Souls is a problem. And you are correct, Guide of Souls is an issue, right? Because it's probably one of the best Soul Warden abilities that they have printed in quite some time.
Yep.
A Soul Warden that has a bigger butt, that gives you an energy, that has you with the ability to do things with your energy. So this card is very good, but Amped Raptor is what allows for the chain to keep going. Right. So I think that Amped Raptor was the correct decision in terms of what to hit out of the energy deck, in addition to the One Ring. I'm not counting Jingantha as a hit from the energy deck.
Yeah, no.
But they made 2 good choices. So the question is, though, does that mean Boros Energy, the deck, is dead, or is it just less good? And
I think it'll be slightly. Time will tell, but I suspect it will be slightly less consistent. I can't imagine the deck is gone. I don't believe that for a second. Yeah.
And we'll get more into it in just a moment.
Yes.
I want to bring up a pretty important thing.
Yeah. Oh, heck yeah. Absolutely. So, so those were the 3 cards that were actually banned, but there were 4 other cards that actually got unbanned. So we actually, that deep Modern ban list, they're starting to kind of pull some things off of it and see what happens, which I love that. As the power creep keeps coming, look back into those kind of design mistakes that were a little too pushed for the past. Let's dust them off and see if they fit a little better now. I think that's great. And the first one that I know people have been screaming about for years, for as long as, like, I got back into Magic 5 years ago or so, 5-6 years ago at this point, and I've been, from the get-go, it's like, oh, so this Modern format, what's going on with this? They should unban Splinter Twin. Oh, okay, calm down. Like, reprint the fetch lanes and unban Splinter Twin. Well, sure enough, they did it. Splinter Twin is back. So there we go. They either caved to pressure and we're all going to regret it, or we were right all along, and hooray.
It's all about that one guy. I remember a while ago out on the Twitter universe that there was a picture of this guy who was outside the old WotC headquarters, and he's pointing at the WotC logo on top of the building, and he's like, "Come fight me to decide whether or not we get to unban Splinter Twin." And so I wonder where that guy is today, because now he doesn't have to fight anymore.
Yep, exactly.
But yeah, Splinter Twin is back.
Yes, it's here,
and it's so interesting because the reason people have been calling for its unban is because a lot of folks don't think that Splinter Twin would be good in today's Modern format. They just want to be able to reminisce about Splinter Twin days.
Yeah, it's an aura for 4. How good could it be? Right?
And that's something that WotC addressed in the ban announcement, right? They said it's a question for the ages. Would it be strong in today's Modern? It was banned in 2016. Do you remember where you were in 2016?
2016? I don't think I'd rather. Wow. Yeah, not really. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it talked, about how, there was this question that the games turned into sort of non-games because you had to figure out whether your opponent was going to jam Splinter Twin on turn 4 on the Deceiver Exarch or the Pestermite or whatever to win the game. And they said, taking a look at it now, can 8 years of a format evolution keep the twin combo in check? And WotC says, we think it can. So, we're also talking about a deck that played Deceiver Exarch and Splinter Twin before, and a lot of those same decks took advantage of cards like Snapcaster Mage, and Preordain has been unbanned in Modern, so hey, that would fit in that deck now. So, maybe we can have this game again where we're playing chicken on whether or not I'm going to Splinter Twin my end of turn target. But, there's a lot of other cards that exist now in Modern. There's like Flare of Denial from Modern Horizons.
Yep.
We have Force of Negation in this format.
Oh man.
So the Splinter Twin combo, in essence, has better ways to be protected now than it did before. Presumably. So, you know,
yeah.
do you get to see cards like cranial extraction effects come back into play, like Unmoored Ego and stuff like that, to straight up just call out Splinter Twin as a way to try to combat that?
Yeah.
You know, does the format shift to try to address the possible threat of Splinter Twin? Does Splinter Twin not care about Deceiver Exarch or Pestermite anymore? And it's quite interesting because, you know, the unbans, the unbans and bans take place on the same day, and the cards are legal on the same day of the announcement. So Magic Online updates today, right? Yep. And Magic Online makes it so the unbans and the bans are in effect. And so, of course, you have to imagine people are going to be jamming some leagues on Magic Online trying to see, can I break Splinter Twin?
Of course.
And the very first list that I saw from the MTGO creators, Bamzing, they 5-0 a league with Splinter Twin in Boros Energy.
Huh, crazy.
So
take now the Amp Raptors out, put the Splinter Twin in.
Yeah. And so, you know, this deck, it is playing like your Johnny's, your Guide of Souls, your Ocelot Pride, 4 Flage, right? That is the Titan that is very strong. And 4 Village Bellringer. Let me tell you about this card, y'all, because it's old. 2 and a white for a 1/4 with Flash. When it enters the battlefield, untap all creatures you control. Why is that relevant? Well, it's relevant because Splinter Twin makes a copy of it. So you tap the Village Bellringer, you make a copy of Village Bellringer, and untaps all of your other Village Bellringers. Rinse and repeat. You keep doing it, you get infinite number. This is the same deck that's win condition as Goblin Bombardment. So you don't even have to get to the attack phase.
Nah.
You could just turn 2 Goblin Bombardment, turn 3 Flash Village Bellringer in, turn 4 Splinter Twin. You don't even need the energy nonsense, right? Insane. So this is literally Boros Energy, which was the #1 enemy, now playing Splinter Twin. So,
I gotta be honest. That sounds like my jam. That kind of a combo just sounds delightful.
Yes,
and the fact that it's just in like one of the best decks anyway.
Right.
That's incredible.
Now the other 5-0 list that was early today on Magic Online, it played Deceiver Exarch. Played 2 copies of Deceiver Exarch. Took advantage of cards like Mishra's Boggle, Dragon's Rage Channeler, Fear of Missing Out from Duskmorn, Ragavan, and Tameo Inquisitive Student. So, playing counterspells, Force of Negation, Spell Pierce, Unholy Heat, Expressive Iteration, Preordain. So playing only 2 creatures really that can take advantage of Splinter Twin, but playing protection around it and value in terms of Fear of Missing Out, which when it attacks you get an additional combat step, you untap a creature.
There you go.
So like,
boom.
We can Splinter Twin Fear of Missing Outs, can't we?
Oh, totally. I mean that actually gives me I don't know, that's reminding me of like Combat Celebrants. You know, like the Combat Celebrant Helm of the Host, like that kind of a loop where it's like, yeah, I'm just going to do this, get another combat, get one more, swing with it, get another combat, get one more. Like, yeah, that's incredible.
You know, folks are brewing, and it's great to see that they're brewing, and I'm interested to see what this sort of like first week ahead of us has. And that's largely because there is a regional championship that is Modern in March that would be held before the next ban list announcement. So it allows those Modern players now to have the next couple months to test for the regional championships properly and see what results come out of that one. I'll be interested to see if Boros Energy stays on top after the bans and then them decide that they might have to take more action, but who knows?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, the Boros Energy is just so explosive, even without Amp Raptor at 2. I suspect some version of that is going to stay in the mix. Hopefully not as dominant as it has been, though. Hopefully it knocks it down a peg, which would be ideal. But yeah. So that's you know, That's probably the title of this podcast, if I'm honest, to try to get the clicks. See, like Splinter Twin is back. I'll call it what it is. We're playing the game.
Yeah.
But it's not the only card that was unbanned. There were a couple of others that I think will be pretty darn big. Another one I want to mention, because I remember when it was banned, Mox Opal. Mox Opal is back, which, it has Mox in the name. It can't be fair. That's just the rule, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a 0-drop mana rock, but you have to have Metalcraft in order to activate it. So in the past, we've seen this in decks that were leveraging affinity, so very artifact heavy builds, just get an extra land drop. I mean, that's, in the early game, that can be genuinely insane. Yeah. And, so it got banned a couple years back at this point, around the same time. I want to say it was around the same time as KCI, the KCI ban.
That's
but
true.
I could be, yeah. But yeah, so it's back. So you play way more Modern than I do. What's your feeling on this? Is this safe, or is this going to be a scary one?
I think that I don't remember particularly about how oppressive Mox Opal was. Mm-hmm. I mean, within the scope of like KCI or Clark Clan Ironworks, right? I remember a lot of Mox Opal in decks like Lantern Control. That was abysmal to play against, except for the person that was playing the deck. Right. And I also remember Mox Opal was enabling cards like Urza, Lord High Artificer to do some crazy things. Mm-hmm. Because with Urza on the board, Mox Opal's Metalcraft doesn't matter because you could just tap it for a blue anyway. So you were like casting multiple Mox Opals essentially as Lotus Petals. Yeah, and so... Yeah. I remember that being a thing, and I'm not sure that Urza is strong enough for the current modern metagame to make a comeback. But there are sure a lot of affinity cards. Most recently that came to Modern is Kappa Cannoneer, and that was sort of the first card that came to my mind when thinking about the unbanning of Mox Opal. That card has Improvise and Ward and does a lot of stuff. So that was the first thing that came to my mind. Can we make Kappa Cannoneer an actual Modern deck now with Mox Opal? But I also, distinctly remember the price tag of Mox Opal before, and it was not cheap. You were talking about like $100, $120 Mox Opals, and that price didn't really come down after they banned it because it's legal in other formats too. And, I think that I looked at TCG Player immediately when the announcement was made, and Mox Opal was sitting around $90 and then started to get more expensive because people were buying them out. Just so they have them, right?
Right.
The last card this card was printed, I think, was Double Masters, because there was a fancy art of full art of Mox Opal. And after that, they put it in a festival in a box. I think it was a Dan Frazier art, if I'm not mistaken, that had a Soul Ring and a Mox Opal in it for one of the MagicCons. And it was really the draw of wanting to buy the box because you already knew that Mox Opal was worth a bunch of money. Right. So you were guaranteed to get one out of this box. So the box like kind of paid for itself. So, I don't know how great it would be. Wizards also cited, looking at cards like Meltdown and Wrath of the Skies as answers to Mox Opal. That exists now that weren't in Standard before. So they're hoping that Standard, that Modern can acclimate to Mox Opal being reintroduced into the format. I think it's probably fine. I think it's probably the most dangerous out of the cards that they've unbanned. If they want to test it for 6 months and say, okay, no, oppressive, back on the ban list it goes, there can't be a lot of people that would be upset about it. Because it's as crazy as it sounds. Almost anything with a Mox starting in its name is a very good card, with the exception of like Mox Tanalite or something like that. That I may or may not have like 40 copies of, because I got it cheap at a card with Mox in its name.
It's got to be great, right? Yeah,
it's got to eventually be worth something. But yeah, Mox Opal, I think is it'll be interesting to be playing with that card again.
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, I fully expect that one will find a home somewhere, and it will see play somewhere. I'd be shocked if it doesn't. So speaking of another card that has been very, very powerful in the past, Green Sun Zenith. That's another kind of old classic that I know, your Primeval Titan style decks can really get nasty with. Yeah.
So this card has been banned since 2011.
Whew.
So we're about 14 years now that this card has been gone from the Modern format.
I would not be surprised if we have listeners out there right now listening to this who were not born when this card was first banned. That is not impossible. Which, if you're out there, shout outs, we see you. But we don't. But we appreciate you being here. Anyway, but yeah,
and Jarvis Moonbeam will love this because Green Sun Zenith was at a time in which green was like really good in Modern. And I know how much that Jarvis loves green cards.
Huge green, biggest green fan out there,
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure. If you ever tune into like Jarvis Moonbeam's commander streams, you totally will see him playing green commander decks
all the time.
And so it's interesting because this would often search you up like a bunch of pieces, right? Or you would like Green Sun Zenith for Dryad Arbor, and you would put Dryad Arbor onto the battlefield for 1 green, and so it would ramp you mana, and then you shuffle this card back into your deck. Let's say you wanted to go get like Strangleroot Geist back in the day, or you use this as Primeval Titan number 5 through 8. That's where this card really shined. And it's interesting that in the ban announcement, they referenced the Yawgmoth combo. And they said it's basically fallen off the map. And it's true. It had basically fallen off the map. But that might not be the case with the One Ring ban, as we mentioned earlier.
Yes.
That was so, decks like that might be able to come back now. And it talks about the Yawgmoth deck essentially focusing on black creatures like Orcish Bowmasters and Zolaput Cutthroat that you can't get off of Green Sun Zenith. But you know what you can get off Green Sun Zenith? Grist the Hunger Tide, because it is a creature when it is in your deck. So you can certainly tutor up this Planeswalker and put it on the battlefield. So in case you wanted to play 8 Grist deck, you can totally do that. It is applicable.
Man. Modern 8 Grist, I'm so there for that. Yeah, rolls right off the tongue too, if I may say.
Yeah, so who knows? It's interesting. It mentioned maybe elves making a resurgence to Modern. It talked about Sylvan Safekeeper being printed into Modern, Wirewood Symbiote being like good targets. But yeah, so it said maybe that this card can actually increase some metagame diversity. And I'll tell you, before they made the announcement today, I thought that they were actually gonna ban or unban Birthing Pod. So when I saw that they unbanned this card today, I was like, oh, they think Birthing Pod's still too strong for Modern. But don't worry, we can tutor cards out of our decks anyway. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see a couple takes on this. They're stronger cards now. We got Endurance. You could always like Green Sun Zenith for Endurance.
Yep.
Which granted you could play for free, but it's also just straight up nice to play on the battlefield for actual
pulling it
mana.
out of your deck. I mean, we've seen what Court of Calling can do. So anytime you can set up a creature toolbox in your deck, and this is so much less expensive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's gonna be significant. Oh, who would really love this was Nadu. Oh wait, yeah.
Oops.
Too soon? No. Yeah.
Imagine
dude. Like you mentioned Sylvan Safekeeper, and like that's first thing. Like, oh man, yeah. Oh, that'd be gross. But anyway, yeah. So Green Sun Zenith's back, which it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, all of a sudden, creature-based toolboxes, are definitely possible. So these 3 that we've seen so far, right? We've got Mox Opal, Green Sun Zenith, and Splinter Twin, beloved kind of staples from the past that kind of exemplify archetypes that we've seen at various points, and maybe they've fallen off a little bit from where they've been. But there's, and I can agree with all of them, and they make sense. And there are plenty of other cards on the Modern ban list that you kind of look at and think, okay, that could probably come off and it would probably be fine. There is one that I did not have that feeling about at all, and it is on this list today as being unbanned, and that's Faithless Looting.
Yeah.
I figured Faithless Looting was for sure going to stay put on that ban list, but nope, they think it's okay in Modern. how do we feel about this? If you're not familiar, Faithless Looting, I've heard it referred to as Red's Brainstorm, and I, as a reanimation enthusiast, I think it's an amazing card. I have it in a bunch of my commander decks and whatnot because draw two cards, discard 2 cards for a single red, and it can flash back for 2 in a red.
Yeah,
it's so good.
It's so good. I can't believe they actually unbanned this card either, because it is very strong. In terms of what Wizards referenced in their announcement, it talked about, being one of the reasons being banned is because of cards like Hogak in the past. Right? You had Faithless Looting. It talked about Arclake Phoenix, Hollow One, which I think is a pretty fun deck to play, to be honest. Faithless Looting does help enable, decks like Hollow One to exist, and I think, out of all the unfairness that exists in the format of Modern, I think Hogak way unfair.
Hogak's
Hollow One is fair in comparison to other things, and so that's not why I'm worried about Faithless Looting though. I'm worried about Faithless Looting for like the Reanimator decks that can reanimate things on turn 2. I'm talking about cards like Persist and Goryo's Vengeance, which Goryo's Vengeance was already a strong deck in Modern without bans or unbans happening. Being able to reanimate like Atraxa and Gristlebrand and Valgavoth, if that's your flavor, on turns, 3, is pretty fast.
Yeah.
So imagine all of that, but now being able to happen on turn 2. Right? Playing turn 1 Faithless Looting, turn 2 Persist. You don't even have to take the most broken card. You can play Archon of Cruelty and like shut your opponent out of the game.
Done.
You can see if your opponent is playing Mono Blue Belcher, and you can name Iona and get Iona named Blue, and they can't play the game anymore.
Gross.
So that's why I'm scared about cards like Faithless Looting existing in that format. Listen, Faithless Looting is like kind of broken in Commander, to be very honest.
Oh, 100%. It absolutely is.
And you can only play 1 copy of that card in your deck. So
well, broken cards in Commander, it's so inconsistent, and you have 3 people gunning for you. So like things that are really cracked in, Soul Ring being like, the kind of poster child for the set, like that's a completely unfair card, like completely and totally, and there's no question about it. It just is. You can have a couple of unfair, busted, like unreasonably overpowered cards in Commander, and it's okay. Like in the format's the format can handle it just by virtue of the way that the game is played. Whereas something like in Modern, like if you get an Archon of Cruelty out on turn 2 in a game of Commander, you got 3 guys gunning for you, and there's probably going to be, targeted removal in there somewhere that can deal with it. So, and on top of that, even if it does go off, you are aiming it at one person, and anyway, so it's still strong, but it's nowhere near. It's not game ending the way that it is in Modern, So, and there's a reason Entomb isn't legal in Modern, and I'm sure never will be, because if you can tee up your graveyard on turn 1. Like if turn 2 reanimation is available, it's gonna be nuts. Yeah. So, and Faithless Looting does that often. So So here we are.
I'll be interested to see. Faithless Looting. Another thing that it allows for you to do in formats like Modern is keep lots of questionable hands. That might only have like 1 land to start, and then you Faithless Looting to try to draw into your other land drops.
Yeah, you mentioned that with Amped Raptor, and with this, it's like, well, I've got a Blood Crypt and a Looting. I'll figure it out. Like, I'll let it ride. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Yep. That's gonna be a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll be excited to play with this card again. It is a favorite of mine to play with. I just think that this card might be too good. It also lets like Phoenix decks become playable again in the format where they weren't before. Well, not in the Modern that existed with One Ring. But maybe you can do that in a new Modern format.
Yeah. That's an exciting idea. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, very cool. So Modern. We got 3 cards banned and 4 cards unbanned. So actually, net we gained a card in Modern. Let's go.
Yeah.
We're up 1. So that's a good exchange. Yeah, in Legacy actually had a couple bans as well. I know I personally don't play Legacy, but I do love hearing the grumblings and kind of keeping an eye on that discussion. And the two cards that were banned there were Psychic Frog and Vexing Bauble. So yeah, it turns out like Vexing Bauble I think is really funny because it's from Modern Horizons 3. It's a 1-drop. Whenever a player casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. Yep. So it turns out a format that is defined by force of will, like having such a clean answer to that is problematic. Crazy. Who knew? Yeah. So we have that.
Yeah. I don't have like any experience playing Legacy. I wish I could add more to like this conversation.
Same. Yeah.
I can just say what I've seen on like social media in Legacy players complaining about these two cards forever. Yeah. You know, who would have known that they would have printed cards in Modern Horizon that not only like wrecked Modern, but also like kind of wrecked Legacy at the same time. You know,
yeah, it's wild.
You know, you're talking about a format that is great that more people want to be playing. You know, the love for like events like Eternal Weekend are huge.
Oh my goodness.
And I think it was Eternal Weekend that actually like showed that these cards need to go, which is a good thing. You know, before when they got rid of Grief, it was because of community outcry. We don't want to play this format because this card exists. And now Psychic Frog exists, and like, no, we definitely still don't want to play this. Like this card is ridiculous. Please do something. Yep. And you know, the tournament results and stuff like spoke for themselves. And players, you know, we're talking about, you know, people like Brian Koval who play this format extensively. He was talking about, you know, Vexing Bauble needs to go. You know, we want to be able to play our Force of Will. Like, you think Legacy, you think Force of Will. At least I do for 100%. many years. I'm like, you can't do this because of this 1 mana uncommon. So it's just like, get rid of the 1 mana uncommon and leave it to the vintage players to get their Moxen countered.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You know, that's probably fair. Not fair for their pockets, you know, like 50 cents versus, you know, thousands of dollars. But that would be me because I don't own Moxen. So sorry,
so shut it all down.
Or vintage
players.
All of
them. Yeah.
No shame.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on that. I wish I played the format more to be able to like talk about it in more detail. You know, Psychic Frog was just too good for the Reanimator decks from me just like looking at lists. Like, let me just discard my target. Just like no repercussion. In fact, make my card better because I just freely discard my cards.
Yeah, and the fact that it would continue to grow, it could get evasion, it could tee up your graveyard exactly as you wanted. The amount of control that you got, and it draws you cards when it hits, like it does everything you want.
Yeah.
All on a 2-drop. So, you know, and I'm with you. I personally I'm not active, you know, playing Legacy, but I do find the conversation interesting, and it was very consistent. Like every person that I talked to who has played Legacy was like, oh yeah, the frog's a problem. Like everybody. I don't think I've seen more agreement across this community than that. So, you know, I trust that this is the right move. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Good stuff. So other than that, on Explorer, Jegantha's banned to match the Pioneer bans, which is what we expected. So also, if you haven't logged into Arena since these bans dropped, there are 4 wildcards waiting for you if you do have a playset of Jegantha's. So that's fun because you know, they recognize Explorer as being a valuable format, and if you if that is affected, they will refund your wildcards. So that's nice.
Yeah.
I thought that was a delightful little surprise when not that I'm not surprised they did it, but I wasn't thinking about that when I logged in, and they're like, oh, here are your wildcards. Like, ooh, nice, thanks.
Yeah.
It was that was a lovely move. I appreciate that. So So good stuff. So, I mean, there we have it, folks. The ban and restricted announcement for December 16th, 2024. This is an eventful one. Yeah, these old formats got shaken up.
Modern. Yeah.
Here's hoping. You know, honestly, like the Modern Horizons era of Modern has seemed kind of as somebody on the outside looking in, I have not been really all that interested in jumping in. These changes give me hope and have me wondering, like, maybe, you know, and actually with Faithless Looting now live, you know, the idea of an actual, being able to build a decent turn 2 reanimation deck in Modern, and like, maybe now's the time to try it out. That could be fun. So I don't know. Yeah. Good stuff. So yeah, Wizards, good stuff. We appreciate these moves. Job. Definitely. I think these are solid across the board. Honestly, it feels like they got it right. There were a couple of cards that they could have, you know, switched around a little bit, like the energy deck, they could have hit any number of those cards and I would have been fine with it. But like Amped Raptor and the One Ring, get out of there. We'll see what happens. Okay, fine.
Mm-hmm.
They could have hit any element of that deck and I would have been okay with it. But yeah, this is good. All in all, good stuff. So that wasn't the only topic that I wanted to touch on today. We also had the Arena Championship 7 this past weekend. So big standard event in quality high tier standard event, and we got to see. Unfortunately, I didn't really catch much of the coverage this weekend. I had some other stuff going on, but looking at the results, the top 8 was not too bad. It was fairly diverse. We had 2 decks really stand above the others in Dimir midrange as well as Gruul aggro. However, in the top 8, we did have 2 Jeskai Convokes and a Simic Terror list. Yeah, which it's kind of nuts. That was represented. I was surprised to see that. But congratulations to Suzuki Sato, who took it down with Gruul aggro. So that was the winning deck of the event. So it turns out, the mouse action with combat tricks. We all, you love it.
Turns out the Gruul deck is good.
It's real. The Gruul deck is real. Yep. Like the red base decks, we know they're always good in best of 1. Are they good in best of 3? Yep, they sure are.
Yeah.
Yeah. No surprise there. Yeah, good stuff. So at the end of the day, it feels good, right? Like I feel like we're in a good standard. I mean, that having 4 different decks represented in the top 8 and have a decent split. Like we don't have like 5 copies of one deck in there, which we have seen that happen before. So, yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, I sort of also taking a look at the list, just because I happen to see some chatter, in the actual chat of Arena Championship 7 saying, oh my goodness, there isn't a whole lot of diversity in standard. Like we were saying earlier, you cannot take a look at a specific 36-person curated tournament, right? Because it was based on people qualifying via different means to get into the event.
Right.
And say that this is standard. I think and it's the same way how I look at when they have competitions like Worlds. Like Worlds has a lot more players than this. And I don't even like to look at Worlds as like a determination of what decks are doing the best, based on people's placement, because like Worlds is mixed format, right? It's like standard and draft.
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
The same thing here. Like I have 36 players who played standard, 36 players who are playing for a prize pool worth $250,000, which is considerably different than just like playing your casual ranked standard on the arena ladder, or your Magic Online League, or even like your Mox qualifier on Magic Online. Like yes, and it's mostly it's the same people who like sometimes criticize net deckers. Listen, the time to innovate is when you are playing your arena ladder or you're playing your Magic Online League and you're testing your deck against the format. 100%. The time to innovate is not when playing for $250K, right?
Absolutely.
The thing to do is to find out which deck you think that is going to most likely get you towards that ultimate prize pool and that world championship seat. So if you had to ask me, right, and I'm brewing all the time, I'm playing viewer brews 100%. All the time. I love what we do. If you had to tell me to pick a deck and what I thought was going to be my best mid-range deck to pick for this tournament, I'm going to tell you also I'm playing Dimir mid-range because Kaito is crazy.
You're damn right. Yeah, that's the right move. I'll tell you,
I was rooting for the one person that registered the Overlords deck. It was a Naya Zur Overlords, because that deck goes over the top of Dimir. So that person came knowing that they were going to play against a field of Dimir. Unfortunately, the deck is very weak to Gruul aggro. So, it all depends who you get paired against. And you have to hope that your opponent slips up and that you have the perfect hands. That's not to say that the only decks that are good in standard are Dimir, Gruul, and like Jeskai Convoke, because that's not the case either. I'll tell you, I went to an RCQ yesterday, right? One of the reasons we're recording the podcast today is because I was away playing Magic yesterday.
Yep.
And this event was also 36 players. And there were so many different decks in the room. And, I went, like me, my brother, a couple of my friends. My brother ended up top 4ing, playing Simic Terror, splashing white, for Sheltered by Ghosts. So playing the Eddie Mercrab Terror deck.
Nice.
Which is probably one of the most underrated decks in the format right now, because y'all should try that, because it looks like it's fun to play. It looks like it's too big brain for me, but it seems like it's very fun.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have, like I said, like 8 A tier decks, I think, in Standard, and every RCQ I've been to so far, 100%, that's the case. I went to an RCQ that there was not one red aggro player in the room. I'm talking like a 50-person RCQ. Nobody on Gruul, nobody on Boros, nobody on Mono Red. And it's not just because they didn't have $30 for Screaming Nemesis, right? And people were just playing different variants of Dimir and Golgari and Domain. People were playing Black-White Life Gain deck. The second place of that one RCQ was a White-Black Delny deck that took advantage of gain life, lose life strategies, and the lizard from Bloomborough, the one that has offspring, that when you play a land takes damage. The landfall creature. Vine Lasher, that's it. Yes.
Yeah.
And so like the Standard is so diverse that you can just play what you want. As long as your sideboard is curated to deal with the metagame field, and you want to show off what your deck can do game one, great. I'll tell you right now, today, during my lunch break, I get lunch breaks at work, and I might play Magic during them. I logged on Arena. I built myself a red-green ramp deck because I really wanted to play Atali Primal Conqueror. I went a solid 9-2 on the ladder to get out of Platinum and into Diamond.
Sick.
Literally just ramping to Atali Primal Conqueror, because the card is still good. And I still get to play green and red Overlords, which are also good, right? Standard is wide open for innovation. And the good thing about that is that the metagame will shift the more that Standard is innovated, right? You'll see Golgari is actually falling out of favor right now, right? A couple weeks ago, we would have been telling you that the Unholy Annex decks are the best decks in Standard. Well, guess what? They're not anymore. Yes, you can still play Golgari with Unholy Annex. Yes, Unholy Annex is still a broken card. But
absolutely.
When you can ninjutsu a Planeswalker in and attack for 3/4, and you can then surveil 2 and draw a card or stun your opponent's next threat, that's probably a little bit better than Unholy Annex at the moment. Kaito's a really good card. You should get them if you don't have them. So, there are tons and tons of things that you can do. So the whole purpose of my little rant here is, don't take a look at the Arena Championship 7 results and think Standard's not diverse, because that is incorrect. In fact, one good resource I would encourage all of you to use, my favorite website to go to and looking up decks, is mtgdecks.net. That website scrapes so much data from different events that are happening digitally, whether that's Magic Online or Arena, whether they are in-person RCQs that are reported to this website with like good numbers. Sometimes content creator tournaments are featured on there, and you can see the deck lists. You can see a 300-person in-person event that happened in Japan, which is a great sample size, and see what those players are coming up with.
Amazing.
It's fantastic. So I would 100%. I could never. And we are not sponsored by mtgdeck.net, so I'm not telling you this because we have to. I'm telling you because it's a great resource. Websites like Goldfish are great. Other websites you can look up deck lists are great. Goldfish is good, but it could scrape a little bit more data, right? So that's why I'm encouraging you to use mtgdecks.net. It's fantastic. You can copy deck lists and import them into Arena and try them out. Like, it's great. So yeah, check that out, because Standard is diverse. There's a reason there were no bans this time. Aether Drift will be coming out by February, right? I believe it comes out Valentine's weekend, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds right. Yeah.
So we are not too far away. We'll get to play this current Standard meta for another roughly 2 months, almost month and a half. Yeah. And that's a while. That's the most time we've ever had with a Standard format. quite a bit. And soon we're going to be able to see, Aether Drift is all about vehicles and the death race, and we're going to be able to see what the effects that vehicles have on Standard. Maybe we'll see a smuggler's copter juiced up somewhere. Who knows?
Ooh. Yeah, fingers crossed. That'd be something.
That would be great.
Yeah.
I'm interested in seeing the first colorless planeswalker that is also an equipment and an artifact at the same time. Because they only showed like the template of it in Vegas.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, we throw out a lot of wild speculation all the time. That that description that Carlo just said, it has been confirmed. That will be a thing. We don't know what it does yet, but we have seen the card frame and type line, artifact, equipment, planeswalker with loyalty abilities was shown. So yeah, that's gonna be weird. I'm positive, but I'm excited to see it. Yeah. But and the thing is too, we're talking about the meta game that we're going to have for a couple of months now, which is exciting. Like, that's delightful in its own right. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see the meta game shift without any new cards being added, just by virtue of what's popular. Because we're talking about Girl Aggro and Dimir Midrange being very popular right now. You mentioned Unholy Annex is a card that was not really a star of this, particular event, but we see it on the ladder all the time. Caretaker's Talent wasn't really a player here either, but we know those decks are real. Like, that's the control deck that we have right now. I've seen a lot of mono white variants of that. I remember there was a Boros variant some time ago that has more, drifted away a little bit, but it, like, all the pieces are still there and it's still a strong concept. So, any one of these ideas, or even Golgari, which is, a couple of people are still holding it down for it, but it's fallen off pretty significantly in recent weeks. But those are all still around. Yeah. And at any given week, depending on what is most popular, any one of those could step back up. And that only happens in a healthy format. That's the only time you see that happen. And so, and we've been fortunate to see a couple of healthy standards over the last few years, and this one definitely reads like it to me.
Quite in a long time, one of the most healthiest standard formats. And I'm glad that we're getting people to come out to RCQs and actually play the format now that it's being more curated and paid attention to. We have a big event that is in the Spotlight series coming up in Atlanta, Georgia.
Heck yeah.
The first weekend of January. It's right after New Year's in Atlanta. And it's standard. And when I'm looking at, how many people currently are registered for the Spotlight series, let me see. I think when I registered, I was like number 580 something.
Okay.
I wonder how many are registered now. I'll try to find that. But it's a lot, and they're doing lots of promotion for it. And I'm so glad that I'm seeing promotion for the event. Like, not only is Star City promoting it, but so is Wizards, which is great. And there's coverage of this event. So, like, there's a reason for people to look in at this particular event. There currently are 654 players registered. The event is in 3 weeks, and it has a 2,000 person cap. So you're talking about, like, old school, like, GP level of an event, which is great. We want to see that. It's going to be
exciting. Yeah,
it's going to be fun. It's going to be a good time. Lots of people are going to get invited to the Pro Tour. Even if you don't do well on day one, there's tons of different events that are going to be happening all weekend because it is an SCG con. So it's just going to be a good time in Atlanta, and I hope I don't get stuck in snow for some reason. But I'm very much looking forward to it.
That rules. Oh, definitely can't wait to see what shakes out there, And I have a complete faith that they're going to be, I suspect the decks here, Dimir Midrange, Girl Aggro, they'll be present. I have no doubt. Yeah. But I also trust that there will be something else that steps into that discussion. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some wild dark horse that ends up, going way deeper than anyone sees coming. Yeah. And I'm excited to hear about it. I got my fingers crossed for some kind of like Insidious Roots or Zombified deck that come out of nowhere. That like nobody's back in Graveyard Hate because no one's on the Abhorrent Oculus deck anymore. It's gonna be fine. It's like no, it's I'm hoping for that. I think that'd be hilarious. So I don't know. We'll see, but I'm excited to see as things shake out because the next few months I think are going to be very good for Standard. Like it's going to be a good time to be in Standard. Yeah. Delightful. Cool. So those were the two topics that I wanted to cover, and I wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time to break them down. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with folks while we're here?
No, just Magic's a blast, and get out and play some of it, whether it's on Arena or in person. There's tons of stuff going on. Find a local game store because they're probably trying to fire standard events.
Yep.
And if you don't really have that much paper product, like if you're somebody who just got into Magic and you just got into Magic with Foundations, you're probably not too far off of making a competitive deck to try to play with at your LGS.
Yeah, you'd be amazed. Yeah,
to help fire those standard events, and you win prize at those events. Or sometimes they're standard showdown. They give you free promo packs, and those promo packs have cards in them. So that way you can go ahead and improve your decks that you have. Just get out there and play. You can only get better at the game from practicing playing the game, whether that's an arena or it's in paper. And yeah, just generally support your LGS because they need it.
Heck yeah. No, I think that's amazing. So I actually did think of a question of the week that we could do. So one thing that we like to do around here is ask a question at the end of the show. Some weeks we're better about it than others, and this week I got one. So it doesn't have to be Magic related, but this one is. So I'm curious. We have over the last couple of years, they have been doing a set, usually like in Q1, that is a remastered. We've had Dominaria remastered, and we have Innistrad remastered coming up. There was also Time Spiral remastered as well. And the notion of, with Dominaria and Ravnica was the other one. So they've done plane specific. So, and with Innistrad, they're doing all the sets that have taken place on Innistrad. Any card from there is fair game, and they're going to get reprinted with special treatment and whatnot. Is there a plane that they haven't done one of those for yet that you would like to see? So if you could do a remastered of all the sets that took place on a plane, what would your plane of choice be?
It would have to be a set that there was, or have to be a plane that there's multiple sets on.
That would be ideal, yeah.
The first thing that comes to my mind would be like Ikoria remastered, and that's because I'd want to see like new remastered serialized triomes at a collector packs. I guess I'm like greedy about that, and I'd want to see serialized dinosaurs because dinos are my jam. But there's only been one set, Ikoria.
Right.
So, it's like how many cards could you actually remaster? Or could you take dinosaurs from other sets and like jam them into that one? Funny enough, so part of Aether Drift will occur on Murugunda, and Murugunda is a plane that has dinosaurs, but we don't know anything about it because it's our first introduction.
Right. Yeah, that one I think we need to have a return to Ikoria first, where they reprint the triomes in them. But
there's not really many planes that they've been to multiple times like that, though. Dominaria obviously was a mainstay.
Yeah, Dominaria and Ravnica have both been, they've repeated those often. So, sure. Yeah. I can think of a couple, and I think it would be interesting if they don't necessarily aren't necessarily tied to the lore. Like I think a Mirrodin remastered, where some of it is from New Phyrexia, and some of it is from maybe like cards from March of the Machine, or All Be One, like that kind of thing could all be potentially in the mix, and that I think, with the right care and attention, could make like a really weird, interesting draft environment too.
Yeah.
Where you get like old school Affinity alongside Poison and like Infect. I think something like that could be delightful. I don't know.
That would be really cool.
That's one of the first ones that come to my
getting
mind.
Some of your old like original Mirrodin block cards serialized. Like, can I get a serialized Memnarch? There's already been serialized Platinum Angel. That was in the Brothers War.
Yep.
Can I get a serialized Memnarch? I think
that'd be amazing.
Serialized Mephedros Vampire? That brings back the memories.
Dude, honestly, I want a serialized Glimmer Void. You remember this guy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Classic. Oh.
Serialized Artifact Lands? The ones that got banned? Serialized Skullclamp? Just serialize all the banned cards.
All of them.
From
that sounds great. Yeah, and you got access, Aether Vial, what else? Oh man. The opportunities there is anyway, so that's
your fish players would need your serialized Aether Vials. Somebody find Pikachu and see how much they would buy serialized Aether Vials for.
That's a good question. I think it'd be
Yeah.
worth something, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Or the professor.
Anyway.
The professor would need to own 4x serialized Aether Vials for the
Mm-hmm.
Merfolk deck. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and do you make a point of getting like consecutive numbers? Like, well, what would that? Oof, man, that'd be wild.
Yeah,
But
you need 1, 2, 3, and 4.
yeah, you need number. Yeah, oh man, just 1, 2, 3, 4. Or of course you go like number 1, number 500, then 69 and 420. You got to get.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
that's the other move. Anyway. So yeah, good stuff. So anyway, that's the first one that came to my mind that I know I have a lot of fond memories of. So anyway. Cool. Well, thank you for kind of indulging me on that one. I appreciate it. So yeah, and thank you, dear viewers and listeners, for tuning in. It means a lot. We do appreciate it. So I know next week. So I mentioned it's not remastered. I'm assuming we're gonna be seeing more previews in the coming weeks. So we'll be sure to mention those as they come up, and other things that come up. So please drop a follow, like, subscribe, all that happy jazz. And yeah, Carlo, do you have anything going on? Between now and next week that you want to let folks know about, or anything coming up?
Just some RCQs coming up.
Heck
That's
yeah.
it. And preparing for the holidays. So for any of you who are out there who are celebrating any holidays, in case for some reason I don't see y'all next week, have a safe and happy holiday. If you aren't celebrating any holidays, just have a fantastic week. Get out there, enjoy yourselves. Or be like me sometimes, who needs to catch up on sleep, and make sure that you're catching up on sleep and then you're hydrating and all of that stuff over the next week, please.
Very important. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I second all of that, and yeah, with that, thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Yeah, in the meantime, have a wonderful week. Catch you later.
See you later.